Welcome back to the Stuff About Money podcast. I am your co-host, Erik Garcia. I'm actually flying solo today. Xavier is out, unfortunately, and he really wanted to be a part of this conversation because we have a pretty stellar guest on, Dr. Roy Salgado. Roy, this is the second podcast in a row where our guest is a university professor. Now, you don't teach money. Our last guest taught business. You are a professor of counseling at the University of Holy Cross. So welcome to the show, man.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, you're actually a friend of the show. This is your first time on this Stuff About Money podcast show. But we did early, I don't know if you remember this, early in the COVID years, we did a YouTube, a Zoom video together, how to thrive as a family during the COVID crisis. And I was going back and watching that, and I think it's relevant to some of the themes that we're going to be talking about here today. And then you also,
it was
prior
great. It was
to
great
that,
to be a part of it and to offer some insight, and great to be back to do it yet again and see what things look like today as opposed to 2 years ago.
Yeah, and prior to that episode, we did one together called "How to Deny Your Kid to Better Their Financial Future." You remember that one? We talked about your son and PJ Masks. Yeah, that was a while ago.
Now I have a little daughter. So fast forward all these years later, I have a little daughter. She's 1, and I'm noticing what she's noticing about money too. Ooh, and she just turned 1, and I'm noticing that she's learned a thing or two about money.
Okay, let's stay there. What possibly could a 1-year-old know about money?
Well, she sees what we do. She sees what we use to go and acquire things. So when I take out my credit card or my debit card to make a purchase and stick it in the little machine to press the buttons, she has picked up on that. She's only 1 year and 1 month old. And prior to that, even at 10 months, she knew to take that card and put it in there and grab whatever she wanted to grab. Like she could grab the milk or whatever it is. She made that connection that this thing allows you to acquire this thing.
That trade. So let me back up, and I don't think I said this when I introduced you. You are a family therapist, but you focus in working with adolescents or children, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
I work primarily with children and adolescents, and so and so conversely, I work with the entire family. The focus being on children and adolescents.
Okay, very cool. All right, so before we hop into our topic, let me ask you the question that we ask everybody. What's one thing about money that you know today that you wish you would have known maybe 20 years ago?
Interest. Interest is a very interesting thing. I guess I had never thought about interest, whether it's 2.5% or 6% or 4.1% or 9.1% or 19.9%. It never crossed my mind the impact that interest and compounded interest has on one's finance. No clue 20 years ago.
Okay, so when you say interest, are you talking about the interest that you pay when you borrow money?
Yes.
Or are you talking about the interest? Okay. So let's sit on that for a little while. So what's the lesson there? Like, what's the impact? How did that hit you? Like, oh man, interest.
Well, you think you go and buy a car for $25,000 and it winds up costing you $40,000, or a house, you think you're buying a house for $350,000 and it's costing you $600,000. It's an interesting thing to come to realize that it's not dollar for dollar, and what the impact of that is month to month, year to year.
Yeah. So the interest is the cost of borrowing money. That's what interest is. And we see that right now with anyone's following the economy, with the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates. They're making it more expensive to borrow money. The cost of money is increasing. And that you said something interesting about compound interest. So believe it or not, a lot of our guests who we ask that question to, and a lot of these people, we have guests who are professors of finance, investment analysts, like just these guys who, CPAs, and most of them have said the same thing, similar to what you said, but the inverse of compound interest of investing. But interest on debt just kind of works opposite. It just works negative towards you.
Right.
It's the opposite example. So compound interest negatively is if I owe $10,000 on my credit card, and let's say I'm just paying the minimum amount and the interest rate is 20%. If you're paying the minimum amount, you probably are paying interest, but if you don't pay enough to cover your interest, then you're paying interest on the interest that was charged to your initial purchase, and then interest on that interest, and it just compounds and it's exponential. In the investment space, it's the opposite. If I invest $10,000 and I earn 10%, at the end of the year, I make 1,000, and then at the next year, if I earn another 10%, I'm earning 10% on my 11,000, and so on and so forth. So that's interesting. So be cognizant of the interest rate on stuff you pay. Very cool.
When you think of that over the course of a lifetime, the hundreds of thousands of dollars that one pays in interest with regard to your home, with regard to your cars, with regard to any loan that you might take out, it's not just a few $100. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of a lifetime. What could one do with that?
So I had a client, this was years and years and years ago, early in my career. And she had a bunch of debt, and we're going through it. And it was a bunch of credit cards, like store credit cards, right? And she had this one Best Buy card and owed the balance was like $2,000. It wasn't a huge balance, but it was like $2,000. I said, why do you have this card? She goes, well, I took it out because they had a really good introductory rate, or it was like same as cash for a year or two. And I bought a TV and some camera equipment, and the card was like 5 years old at this point. And I said, well, how much did all that cost you? She's like, it was like, I don't know, $1,500 or something. I said, do you realize by the time you pay this card off, that TV and that camera is going to cost you $4,000, whatever the number was? And it was significantly more than, it was double what she paid for it originally. And her eyes got big, and she was like, no way. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I was in college, at the university, they would have these credit card tables lined up, and you would get credit cards. Like, oh, let's sign up. I'm 18 years old, and I'm signing up for these credit cards, and I have them. And I got used to using credit cards, and I liked it. It was fun. Now, my income was very limited as an 18-year-old college student, and I had all of these credit cards. And then I went to stores. I would go to, remember, Dillard's and JCPenney and Sears. Sears was a thing back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I would, and they said, would you like a credit card, a department store credit card? Sure, I would love one. And I think back to clothes that I would buy at Dillard's or JCPenney's or Sears even. Who would buy clothes at Sears? But anyway, nevertheless, I must have. I did. And I would have these credit cards. Why do I have these credit cards? Now, I don't, at this point, I have learned not to have department store credit cards or a Target credit card or a Best Buy credit card. I learned not to have those. But it took a while. It took me well into my early 30s to figure out not to get that type of credit card. I don't even go to those stores. Why would I use those cards?
They trick you into thinking you have more money than you really do. Right. So quick note, and then I want to hop to this really interesting survey about kids and money. Sears, you said who would buy clothes at Sears? Sears had the best guayaberas. So you can go to Sears and buy the man, I love them.
Right? Yes. That, and that's what I...
You remember that?
Wow, flashback. I did get them. There. They did have awesome guayaberas.
they were fantastic, and they're inexpensive. Anyway,
great.
So there was a study, CNBC and Acorns did this study, and they were surveying kids or parents or surveying people about whose responsibility is it to teach kids about money. So I want to read just a couple short sentences here, and then I just want to have a conversation about this and get your thoughts as someone who understands the development of children and family systems, right? So 83% of U.S. adults said parents are the most responsible for educating their children on the topic. I don't think many people would argue with that, right? So 83%.
Correct.
Only 15%, this is crazy, only 15% of parents said they spoke with their children more than once a week about household finances. 13% said once a week, and 16% said once a month. 24% talk to their children less often, and 31% never do. So on one hand, we have Americans saying, yeah, it's parents' responsibility. And then on the other hand, we see that parents are not actually doing it. What are your when you hear those numbers? I'm curious. What's your thoughts on that?
And what comes to mind is that we inadvertently do talk to our kids about money and we don't realize it every day with everything that we do and every decision that we make. We may not have direct conversations, but we indirectly communicate our ideas about money. So if you DoorDash, if you drive through a fast food restaurant, if you just pick up something at the checkout line as a last minute item, we're communicating to our kids something about money, as opposed to if you make a grocery list and you go shopping on a particular day for the items of the week and you use them a certain way and you don't buy things impromptu and act like money is this endless resource. We communicate to our kids. We may not be talking about it directly and having conversations, but we certainly do communicate. Modeling is the number one way that we show our kids what our ideas and values are about any given topic.
So what you're suggesting is the behaviors that we may be modeling or communicating, or the lessons that we may be communicating, may not be the lessons that we really want to communicate. Did I understand the way you said that?
Absolutely. So if my children, if my son who's 5 now says, Daddy, I want, to go to whatever fast food restaurant, like because he sees the logo, we drive by it. We either can choose to pull in and say, okay, instant gratification. You want this? I don't feel like cooking, so let's just pull in and get it anyway on the way home. That communicates one thing. Or, you know what? No, we have food at home. We're going to go home. We'll be there in 20 minutes. We're going to make dinner, and we'll have that. Each of these decisions that we make with regard to our daily needs, food in particular, because we eat every day. Ideally, we would eat every day. And so this is something we're communicating to our children. So we need to engage in behaviors that communicate some sort of discipline, routine, responsibility, and the connection that it has with money.
So I think, too, in your story there, driving by McDonald's or whatever, Popeyes seems to be the thing in my house. My daughter she just wants Popeyes all the time. We don't get it all the time. She got mad at me because I said, we're not doing Popeyes at least we're taking a break from Popeyes for a month, and that wrecked her. I'll find out if that was a good parenting technique 20 years from now.
I love me some Popeyes. What can I say?
She might be visiting you in 20 years and say, my dad made me take a break from Popeyes. But those opportunities, right? Like those conversations, I think that if us as parents and all those parents listening, or grandparents, or if you're in any position to influence kids, is using those opportunities as opportunities to teach about money, right? Like, yeah, we could get McDonald's, and yeah, we might have money for McDonald's, but if we get McDonald's, then we might not be able to do something else that you really want to do this weekend. Or, hey, okay, so we can get McDonald's today, but then this weekend we can't get that thing that we were going to do, that experience, that toy, or we can't go to the jump park, or we can't go to the zoo. And I think those are the opportunities where kids can start to maybe make decisions and understand, maybe.
Absolutely. And it's important that we have these explanations, that we do what's referred to as authoritative parenting. That when we drive by and they say, oh, let's have Popeyes, because they see the logo, they see the store, the restaurant, that we say, no, we're not going to get Popeyes. We have chicken at home, so we're actually going to grill some chicken and have a healthy meal. We already bought that, so there's no need to buy some more. We'll do that. But what we can do is later on use that money towards something else. We'll go to the jump park, for example, and have that explanation. Don't just say no. It's important to say no, and this is the reason why, and explain it to their developmental level of understanding. We have to take the time to explain to children why things exist, not just because I said so and because I'm your father or I'm your mother. They need to really understand. They need that respect to know that we are interested enough in their understanding that we take the time to explain it to them.
So let's stick on this, like this self-denial kind of thing, right? You're denying your kid a hamburger. It could be you're denying your kid a hamburger, a new cell phone, a computer, going on spring break with their friends. But let's say you have the money. Let's say money's not an issue. Okay. that you can afford a hamburger from McDonald's and the jump park and a new iPhone. How important is it just in the development of the child to say no sometimes, to self-deny, to not necessarily get everything that you want?
It's crucial to be able to communicate that value, that just because someone might have the resources and the means to be able to acquire much of anything that they want, doesn't necessarily mean that having the ability to acquire these things are necessarily in one's best interest. Many people, many wealthy people, very affluent people, their children seem to suffer more down the road with things such as addiction. Addiction is a big issue and highly correlated with the children of highly wealthy people because they've never been denied anything in certain instances. And so not denying oneself, fill in the blank, you get conditioned. You get conditioned to think, I want this, I'll have it. I want more of this, I'll have more of it. I want more of that, I want more. And then it becomes a habitual problem that can become a form of misuse to abuse, to addiction, to dependence, whatever it may be, whether it's not just drug and alcohol, but sugar, clothes,
McDonald's,
shopping, fill in the blank. If you feed that and you just repeat that habitually, it becomes a problem. So we don't want to create the conditions where we are conditioning children to think that just because they have the ability to acquire something that they ought to.
So this is interesting you bring that up. In that same study, they found that people who have higher incomes talk less about money with their kids, and people with lower incomes talk more about money with kids. Does that stat surprise you?
I hadn't heard that stat before, but now that I hear it, it actually makes sense. You know, those who have limited resources, if you only have X amount of dollars to work with, then perhaps just natural law is going to dictate that you have these conversations out in the open about, you know what, we can't get this today because we need this. So, you know, we need to be able to buy food for the week, so we're not going to buy this toy. So that conversation is perhaps going to take place in a lower socioeconomic household as opposed to one where that's not something that needs to be discussed because it's not an issue. So it makes sense when you think about it, but quite frankly, I had never heard that nor thought about it in that way.
Yeah, when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's actually interesting. You would think that people with a lot of money would be talking about more money or talk about money more often. But I guess they kind of maybe go back to what you originally said, that the conversations more are on behaviors. It's what I'm seeing. It's communicating not with words, but by those actions. You know, it's interesting to me, and I hear this regularly from people in different demographics, okay? I don't want my kids to have to experience the hardships that I experienced. Now, there's different types of hardships, right? Like, so the idea is I can use money to insulate them from some of these experiences that were hard for me. Now, what's interesting is in some of those same conversations, I hear those individuals tell me that those hardships or those obstacles actually help them build character. So I'm curious that you know, it's kind of like that survey, you know, parents, and most people agree, parents are supposed to teach them, but no one's teaching them. Hardship and obstacles teach character, but yet we want to insulate our kids sometimes from hardship. So how do you find that balance as a parent where, like, I've got money to insulate my kid from a particular hardship, but maybe I need to let them experience it?
Yeah, you know, it's something that is very real and a very interesting phenomenon because individuals who grew up with the struggle, you know, the struggle is real, you know, they grew up with it, and then they reflect back on their experience, they realize, you know what, I've been able to do these things, and were it not for these challenges, were it not for these obstacles, I would not have learned what to do and what not to do. And so I didn't know it back then, but they offered me a lot of growth opportunities and a blessing. As opposed to those who things just, no fault of their own, just were easier. Okay, fine. But then you don't have certain opportunities to learn and grow from it. You know, I myself right now, I think about my experience. I had my struggles. You know, I came from a lower socioeconomic status, single head of household, female family. And so we weren't poor, but we weren't as well off as other people. I look at my children's situation, and they have a very different situation. They can get anything that they want. Now, do I want to just buy them anything that they want simply because they want it, or offer them anything that they want just because it's possible? No, they have to hear the word no. They have to learn about the value of money, time, energy, effort, and that things just don't come, that you have to work towards things, because then you value something more when it's taken effort, when you've had to work towards it, whatever it is, whether it's a toy or a house or whatever. If something is just given to you, there's no value to it. You don't understand. You really don't understand the time, the energy, the effort, the work, the sweat, the tears, everything that goes into the acquisition of whatever it is that it may be. And I'm not just talking about material things, but just anything of value. It takes effort. Exercise, if you want to be in good shape, if you want to be healthy, that takes effort to do, and there's a lot of discipline involved in that. And maybe not necessarily money per se, but there's discipline and effort and restraint, and then you reap the benefits of that.
Yeah. You were talking about kids need to learn, right? Your son, your daughter needs to learn about money, and I think what's important is, and I don't always know what the right answer is. Like, what's the exact lesson you need to go teach? But what I think is really important is, here's the reality. Let me back up and say this. The reality is, I don't work with kids. I work with big people. And generally speaking, adults don't have healthy money habits. There's people who do well, they make good money, but this idea of building wealth and maintaining wealth is lost on a lot of people. A lot of people are successful for various reasons. But if parents are responsible for teaching the kids about money, and the parents are not really good with money, I can see that's a daunting task to have to, now I'm supposed to teach my kid about money. But what's interesting is, most people know what they should be doing. They just don't do it. It's like health and working out. Yeah, I know I should work out. I know I should be eating fruit and drinking more water and not eating Popeyes, but I don't do it. So we as adults, as big people, we know what the right things are, but we just have a hard time doing it. And here's the problem. You said this from the outset. Model behavior. There's a study, and I think we've talked about this in the past, from the University of Minnesota, 2011. This is what it said. It said, parents provide 3 themes of financial management to children, including saving, how money is managed, and how financial matters are discussed. The vast majority of these children in these studies learned about a family's propensity for saving and financial management through direct observation versus through conversations regarding these behaviors. In other words, parental behaviors tend to stick with children more so than discussions of what ought to be done related to money.
Absolutely.
Ooh.
It's significant. And it happens in absolutely everything. We were over at some individuals' homes, some acquaintances' homes for an engagement party. That's what it was. Mm-hmm. And it was people that we didn't know. It was for an engagement party. And the kids were upstairs playing, and they had these virtual reality metaverse goggles, whatever. And my children don't have that. But they've seen the commercials, and then I've explained, say, oh, what is that? And it's like, I don't know quite exactly what that is, but I don't have a good feeling about that. I don't know that I necessarily would use that myself. I would not go into the metaverse. I would not go into some virtual reality thing. There's something about that just on a philosophical level that feels uneasy to me. That was a conversation that I had with my 5-year-old. We go to this is weeks earlier. Mm-hmm. We go to this engagement party. The kids are all upstairs playing. These are children that he doesn't know. The little boy has them, and he has them on, and all the other kids are putting them on. And he comes downstairs, and I'm like, what are you doing? Why aren't you upstairs with the other kids? And he's like, they're playing with those goggles that we saw on TV the other day, and I don't know if that's a good thing. So I'm just going to wait for them to, do something else, and then I'll go play something else. They listen. They pay attention. Everything we do teaches. And so even when we think that they're not absorbing what we say, they are, or what we do, they are. So we have to just keep modeling behaviors that we want them to acquire. And if we're surprised, it's like that commercial back in the 80s, like, where did you learn to smoke cigarettes? Why are you smoking cigarettes? It's like, I learned it from you, Dad. I don't know if you remember that commercial.
Yeah.
A father caught a 14-year-old boy smoking cigarettes. Yeah. I learned it from you, Dad. And it's true. What we do teaches more than what we say.
That's what. Yeah. Don't do as I. What did I say? Don't do as I do. Do as I say. Like no.
Exactly.
You're going to do as you do.
That doesn't work.
So what's interesting is that I think it's twofold. I think when our behaviors align with our words, I think it's even more powerful. So I think it's important that as parents, we're looking, and this starts young, all the way up through, I would say into high school, because at some point, if you didn't teach your kid something early enough, it's going to be really, really, really hard to teach them at 16 when they're doing everything you don't want them to do, and that's probably where you come in, and you're probably counseling those families.
It's like compounded interest, right? With each passing year, it makes it that much more difficult to instill a new behavior. If you want to get it to really stick, you have to do it before the age of 6. And if you want it to, and then there's certain things that have to be in there by 6, the fundamental stuff before 6, and then some of the other more complicated things by the age of 12, and then the other things by the age of 18. So you have like 3 distinct 6-year periods of time to introduce things that become fundamental and rooted in the individual and installed and instilled in their memory bank. If you introduce it too late, it becomes that much more difficult to undo.
Yeah, much more difficult. So as we're getting close to our time here, let's talk about some specific things to teach kids. We're talking kind of vague about we have to teach kids and model good behavior. So let me share with you and give me your feedback of maybe things that we should be teaching our kids early. And oftentimes talk about, okay, teach kids about money. Well, what exactly should we teach kids about money? I think the first thing is just to understand the value of what is money. You shared that your 1-year-old already understands that there's something happening. There's an exchange that things, I have to give something up to get something in return. Obviously, the age of your kid, you can speak more concretely, I would imagine, about what you give up and what you get in return. But just that concept of, if I want something, I have to give something up.
Right. And so, for example, if you have just the concept of numbers. Oh, go ahead. The concept of numbers. So children are familiar with numbers. So they know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll go with some 8, 9-year-old kid who knows how to add, subtract, multiply, divide. Okay, so you have those concepts, those fundamental concepts. And if they want to go buy something, they see a toy. Okay, this toy costs $30. Okay, this costs $30. What does that mean? Do you want to get this now, or do you want to get something else later? $30. What does it take to earn $30? Where does $30 come from in the first place? Let's talk about this. What sorts of chores do people have to do? What sorts of jobs? Like how much does mommy or daddy make in an hour? And so you might have a family. Let's say you have a family that they make minimum wage. Minimum wage is what, $7.25, $7.50?
Not a lot, yeah.
And so if you have someone who makes minimum wage, it's okay, this costs $30. This is 4 hours of work. Mommy or daddy has worked 4 hours of work. It's an 8-hour workday. That's half a day to get this one item. And so correlating time with money is very important. So with the kids, like, okay, what can you do for 4 hours worth of work? What can you do with 4 hours worth of work? Maybe you can mow the lawn. That might take you 2 hours to mow the lawn. Another day you might want to do some dishes and some laundry. That might take some, and you add up all that time, all that energy, all that effort, all that work is equivalent to this $30 toy. Mm-hmm. And then the kid might be like, I don't know if that's worth it.
I love that. I love that. I love what you just said about correlating our money with our time and our skills and what we do, and that trade-off. Like, is it worth it? Do I want to do it? Now, that kind of leads into the second thing that I want to talk about. If we're teaching kids about money, I think it's really important that we give them money. It's like me trying to teach you how to swim without a swimming pool, or how to ride a bike without a bike. So as parents, we have to say, I'm going to give my, even your 5-year-old, I'm going to give him $5, right? We're going on a trip. We're going and we're stopping at Buc-ee's. You got $5, right? You can buy anything you want. What are you going to buy? So I think it's important that we somehow get money into our kids' hands. If we make them do chores, that's great. If we want to give them allowance, that's fine. I would suggest, I was against an allowance early in my kids' lives because I'm just going to give them money. They need to earn it. But then what I started realizing was give them allowance in things that I otherwise would have bought for them. Let them buy it. Let them, if they want, to get Chick-fil-A for lunch today, then maybe, I'm not saying that I'm going to make them buy their food all the time, but every now and then, let them make that decision. But they have to have money to spend.
Yeah. My son recently he's 5, he recently lost his tooth like 3 days ago. So the tooth fairy came and gave him $5. And so he's like, oh, did I get $5 because I'm 5 years old? And I'm like, you know what? Maybe that's the way the tooth fairy operates, probably. And so then he has his $5, and we went to the grocery store, and there was like this dispenser with different candies, like gummy worms and jelly beans and whatever. And so he's like, oh, can I get this? And I'm like, okay, if you get this, it's $3.99 a pound. So $3.99 a pound. And so what does that mean? So that's $4. So $4. I have $5. I can get this because 4 is less than 5. Like, all right, go ahead. 4 is less than 5. We get to the register, and it came out to $4 and some change with the tax. And it was like, it said it was $4, but it's more than that. Now I only have 2 quarters left. And he was upset. He's like, I don't want this candy. Now I don't have anything. I'm like, well, maybe that's the way it works. And so just learning the emotionality that goes with it, because he was feeling all sorts of big feelings about it. It's like, I don't want this. I want my $5. Well, maybe next time you'll think differently about whether you buy something with those $5 or whether you hold on to it. You don't like the way this feels right now. Yeah.
And so did he end up getting it or no? Did he put it back on the shelf?
Oh, he bought it. He already paid for it. And it's interesting because the candy is sitting there, and it's like the bane of his existence. Every time he walks by, he thinks about how he doesn't have $5 anymore. He refuses to eat his little gummy worms.
That's funny. So I think it's also important as we give kids money and they make buying decisions, I think it's really important as parents. Tell me what you think about this one. Is that we're really careful not to shame a purchase. Like, is that really a smart purchase? Are you really happy with? Like, I find myself at times like, okay, you want to buy that? Is that really that? Is that really what you want? And like, I would ask it multiple times. I was like, one time it's okay to make them think about it, and the second time it's like you start to shame them. So I've started to ask, like, how do you feel about your purchase, right? To kind of say, oh, I'm happy. Oh, that's great. That's a good use of money. So just be careful.
Yeah, I go back to, just fundamental natural law and natural consequences. He sees that little bag of gummy worms and he gets upset again. This has been going on for about 2 or 3 days now. And it's going to really get him to start thinking more about it. It's like, if I want to have money, I want to be able to think about it differently and use it differently. He really understands that he misused it, or at least he thinks he misused it in that instance, because it's not what he thought it was going to be. And he thought that he would somehow have more. I don't know what he thought. But nevertheless, he's 5, he's learning. And to associate that all these things are connected, our behavior with our thoughts, with our feelings, there's a lot of feelings surrounding money. Anxiety, a big one. Concern. People are really anxious about money. And so to experience this at a young age really can set the stage in terms of what types of decisions I'm going to make later on in life, because I don't want to feel this anymore. I want to feel secure. I want to feel safe. I want to feel confident and competent in my decisions surrounding money, and not insecure, frightened, angry, disappointed.
And what's interesting is the behaviors that they observe in most adults is insecurity. It is fear. It is concern. It is anxiety. I don't have money to do this. So no, we can't do that because we don't have money for that, right? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But I think it's important to have those thoughtful conversations. Yeah, we can do that. But if we do that, then here's the trade-off. And I do think it's important that we include our kids in some financial decisions where maybe, if you're married, you and your spouse may be making decisions about a vacation or where you're going to go out to eat. But if your kids are going to be participating, I think it's important to have them participate in that conversation and give input so they understand the cost of things. They understand that things just don't happen. Like, hey, we're going to Disney World. We can stay 5 days, but if we stay 5 days, then we have to cook all of our meals in a hotel. But if we go for 4 days or 3 days and we can buy all our meals there, what do you think we should do? And kind of incorporate them in that decision process. And I think that's part of observing behaviors.
Absolutely. And that's a wonderful way to approach it with things like vacations and with items like clothes. You can buy a pair of jeans that costs $150. You can buy 3 pants and 3 shirts for the same value. What do you want to do? You can get this one pair, or we can get enough clothes that you can wear for half a week, So having these conversations so that the kids can, see how this operates and that they have a choice in it.
Yeah. So last question, then we're going to wrap it up because I know that you have a time commitment here. So if your son doesn't spend his $5 on a pound of gummies, all right, and he decides to save his money or to do something else, like what's that conversation? Like what else would you consider telling him to do with his money?
Well, I guess it would depend on how things would evolve. What comes to mind right now is if he happens to come across another amount of money. Let's say he gets another $5 because of his birthday. And then now he has the $5 from the tooth fairy and $5 from the birthday. He didn't spend the initial $5. Now guess what? Now you have $10. You have $10.
Yeah. As
opposed to having only that $5 because you spent $5 last week on gummies or wormies or whatever it is, gummy worms. And so just having that conversation and adding to it, it's like now you have 10. I wonder if you keep doing this, how much you can wind up having.
Yeah. And I would say on top of that, I'm glad you went there, set a goal. Hey, that $30 toy, remember that $30 toy? We're still going to get it and we're going to save towards it. So now we have 10. So what else can we be doing? How else could we be earning money? Next time it's like, hey, the baseboards need to be cleaned. Cool. I'll give you $3 to clean the baseboards. Oh yeah. Now we're instilling that long-term planning in their mind.
Exactly.
And I'll also say a good conversation with kids.
You start off with these types of items. No, you start off with these types of items, and by the time they're 30 and 40, it's real estate. And they own farmland or homes and buildings. And, so you start small at 5, and then it's bigger things as adults.
Yeah. So we've taught kids how to earn money. We've taught kids how to spend it. We're teaching kids how to save it. We're teaching them how to invest it. And these are conversations, these are just with everyday things. So, parents, if you have a child, look for those opportunities to have conversations with your kids about money. They're abundant. Every time you go, anytime you go to work. Why do you go to work? You go to the grocery store. How are you buying the food? You're buying first day of school clothes. Where's that money coming from? The opportunities are abundant to start having these thoughtful conversations about money. And you don't have to be perfect. And I will add this. Another thing you want to teach your kids early is we talked about saving it, spending it, earning it. Teach them how to give it. Teach them how to share with other people who don't have money. And here's you'll like this. There's a study. It's an interesting study. I think it's from the Harvard. A couple people have done this study, but this one comes from Harvard Business Institute. And it says that money does buy happiness, but it's all about how you spend it. And the happiest people are the people who spend money on others.
That makes sense.
That's a good value to instill in a kid earlier. Your kind of earlier example about buy whatever you want, then you want more, then you want more, then you want more, then you want more, and you can never have more, and you're never happy. This is the antithesis of that. Is don't buy yourself more.
Absolutely, because I think of my own experience. Sure, I appreciate when someone gives me a gift. I do. But I do receive greater joy when I see that I've given someone something and they can benefit from it. That makes me feel a lot better. Not just me as an individual. I would imagine it's universal. It feels good to do for others, whatever that may be, whether it's a gift or some other type of valued good or service. It feels good.
And I think it's important. Now, sometimes, particularly for people who are charitable, sometimes they don't like to be braggy about that. But I think it's really important that you include your kids in some of that. Let them see some of that because they're going to observe it. And we know study after study tells us, and Dr. Roy just confirmed it, that their behaviors that we're modeling behaviors for them. So if you want your kids to learn healthy habits about money, start learning healthy habits about money for yourself and start modeling that behavior for them. Roy, close us out, man. Is there like any like silver bullet about, I'm sitting here parenting. I've got 3 kids, and I used to think I was a really good parent. And then, they got out of like a certain age and I realized I don't have as much control over them. Then I started questioning, oh my gosh, maybe I'm not a really good parent. And now I'm like, I guess I'll find out in 20 years if I was a good parent. Any silver bullets to parenting?
Yeah.
Help us cope, man.
Wow, silver bullets to parenting. That's a loaded question. I think the thing that I can say is
you got 1 minute to answer
it. You've done a good job when your kids are adults and they are functioning, self-sufficient, contributing members to society. That's when we know how well of a job we've done. But before that, with regard to the thing to do now, the one thing, spend time with your kids. Simply spending time with your kids and you engage in appropriate, healthy behaviors, they're going to model that for you.
I like that. Spend time with your kids.
You'll be modeling that for them, and they're going to pick it up.
Yeah, spend time with your kids, and those are the opportunities to have conversations about money. Roy, man, thank you for joining us. I'm going to put in the show notes here the links to the other episodes that you were on, so people can learn four ways to deny your kid to better their financial future. And I think the one about coping with COVID is still very relevant today. And in fact, I think one of the things that we talk about is spending time as a family unit. So, Roy, man, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.